Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a PJTN podcast, and I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org, as well as all the other platforms that you use to access your favorite podcasts. On this week's podcast, I have invited Steve Kobrin with Freedom Fighters to Proclaiming Justice. Stephen's mission is to feature American freedom fighters who are committed to defending our republic. I was honored to have been interviewed twice on Freedom Fighter to talk about PJTN's mission. Stephen, thank you for joining us today on Proclaiming Justice.
Hi, Laurie. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to join you. Thank you.
Oh gosh, you're a great patriot, a great American. This is so wonderful. It's wonderful to have you on the program today. So, Stephen, let's start with the beginning. Talk about the mission of Freedom Fighters. I love the title. You know, we have just gone through the worst 4 or 5 years in, I believe, America's history, and you are featuring freedom fighters, people who are fighting to preserve our republic. Tell us about that mission.
Sure. You're referring to the Gallery of Freedom Fighters, and that is a major component of a larger website called the Freedom Defense Resource Center. And that website has an interesting beginning. So you're right. It's been a hard 4 or 5 past years. Mm-hmm. At about the time when the globalists were launching the scamdemic and using it as a ruse to try to steal our election, I was on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, as you know, was started as a business-to-business connecting platform, but a few years prior to the 2020 election became very political. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, we'll get political here. And fortunately, I became very attuned to dissenting voices when the scamdemic was launched, including Stephen Kirsch. You familiar with Steve Kirsch?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So he has a good story. He was once a vax advocate, saw people, unfortunately, around him dropping like flies. He's data-driven, so he started distributing data to talk about how this so-called vax is not safe and not effective. So I had the audacity on LinkedIn to post one of his posts. What he did was he actually published data from Medicare, which basically said, contrary to common belief, this vax is killing old people, not saving them. So because I was so audacious to print government-issued information, LinkedIn kicked me off, wiped out 12,000 contacts and hundreds of posts. So my attitude was like, tough. So I formed my own website to post and distribute this information. And along the way, I connected with other people like me in business who had been censored and canceled and so on. And we formed kind of an affinity. One of them is a freedom fighting lawyer in New Jersey named Ron Baruti. Mm-hmm. And I got to know him, and he had been featured on the podcast of many conservatives and patriots. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want to try a different angle in an interview with you. And he was like, what is that? And I will tell you, I'm trained in martial arts. I practice Bagua Kung Fu. And in that discipline, it's very, very important that you know your why. If you don't know your why, you will not be able to make a commitment to the practice. You certainly will not be able to make it through a 5 or 6 or 7 hour exam. Mm-hmm. You need to know your why. And I'm sure you're familiar with other fields where they keep proclaiming, know your why, know your why, know your why. All the success gurus say, know your why.
Mhm.
So I said to Ron, I said, we need to explore why you are fighting for freedom. We know what you're doing in terms of the lawsuits and who you're suing and all this, but why are you doing this? And the
Mhm.
reason why we need to give you that kind of megaphone is because there's a lot of people who are getting hurt by this scam, who are getting
Mhm.
hurt by the oppression,
Right.
and they need to feel inspired and encouraged by people who are already stepping up
Mhm.
and hear your story. And once they hear that, hey, you're just a guy who's taking on a larger mission, they could kind of like, well, maybe I could do something too. So his attitude was, I never heard of this, but I'll give it a shot. And 30 minutes later, he's like, this is the best ever.
Wow.
And it really was a remarkable interview. And thanks to him, I got started and he referred me to a whole bunch of people. And I've been able to plug into a nice various networks of freedom fighters and introduce to people like you.
Mhm.
And that's how we got started.
Wow, that's incredible. So tell us some of the people that you have interviewed on this platform and why. Not only interviewed, but why you interviewed them. What was it? Because you just talked about, the whole COVID the scamdemic that we just survived and lived through. But who are some of the other individuals or organizations that you have shared?
It's so interesting. Some of the names have a national and international renown. Colonel John Mills,
Hmm.
Tom Renz, Jovan Pulitzer. There are people that have been circulating in conservative and patriot circles for a while.
Hmm.
But I also have paid attention to people that travel in a smaller circle who step up in their own local community
Hmm.
on especially on behalf of their children because of all the trans stuff and the Marxist ideology that is being promoted in our schools.
Right.
So there's been a nice mixture of people taking stands in various arenas, legal, political, education, religious,
Hmm.
and et cetera, because the enemy has taken the battle to all our various fronts, and therefore people need to step up in defense of all these various fronts.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have to tell you, I read an article this morning as I was just preparing for the interview. And of course, I've got a South Africa Bible study after this interview. But I was reading about the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and I have been a member and participant of the NRB every year at their convention since 2007. So 18 years.
Hmm.
And when I first started, there was only one pro-Israel organization at the NRB. It's the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, but um, the majority of participants, media outlets, and supporters, support staff for the Christian media, there's anywhere from 5 to 6,000 members, but most of them come from an evangelical Christian background. And so I noticed because, as we've talked on your show, the mission at PJTN is to educate Christians to stand with Israel and the Jewish people against the rise of global anti Semitism. And of course, we've been doing this since 2002. And I thought, NRB is a great place for Jewish and Christian media outlets, networks to unite together to stand and support Israel. So there was only the Ministry of Tourism that was there back then in 2007, the first year. Now there are there's a plethora of Jewish organizations, Jewish media that participate at the NRB. It is the most amazing collaboration of Jews and Christians. It kind of reminds me of the prophet Isaiah in chapter 11, where he talked about Ephraim and Judah uniting together in the last days against the enemies of the enemy, the Philistines, who Israel is facing today with Hamas. And it's taken 18 years to have this much impact and influence, and now we are uniting together, much like the prophet foretold. And why I bring all this up is because you are unique. In a lot of these freedom fighter organizations and these Tea Party organizations, you happen to be Jewish, and you're proud of your Judaism, and you are setting the standards of being the example, just like in Zechariah in the last days. 10 men from the nations will come and grab hold of the tzitzit of a Jew and say, we want to go with you because we know God is with you. I look at what you're doing and I say, wow, this is amazing. Here is a gentleman who is standing on his faith in the Tanakh, and he is standing up against the evil and the wickedness. How are you received in this evangelical Christian space, and also the secular world? Because we also see a growing number of shows and podcasters like Tucker Carlson, like Candace Owens, like Joe Rogan, and others who are promoting anti-Semitism. How are you received in these circles, Stephen?
Well, okay. You're touching on a really important point there. Getting back to the website, you're talking about really the third component of the website that I mentioned, the Freedom Defense Resource Center. The first, as we discussed, has important information about the issues. The second one is the interviews on the Gallery of Freedom Fighters. But the third component is biblical views on the current war. I have done a lot of research into the publications and the teachings of legendary Jewish teachers who are aware of what's going on, who are modern thinkers, but their heart and their practice is traditional, and they share insights into how the Tanakh, how Jewish thinking and Jewish history can give us lessons to deal with the technocrats today. So I made a major commitment to distributing those, and they are on a prominent section of the website, and I continue to do that research. To answer your question, the idea that the Bible has answers to today's solutions, I think, has not hit a lot of people's radar. But I think it's going to take time. And I'm not sure for all the reasons of that. So a lot of the feedback I get, it's not so much about the biblical teachings, but about me. So now professionally, I'm in the insurance business, and I happen to be in this business for a long time, and I know many other brokers, and a lot of these brokers are evangelical Christians, and we're personal friends. So a lot of times they'll say to me, like, what are the Jewish people doing here? How can anybody vote Democratic, whether you're Jewish or Christian? How especially can the Jewish people vote Democratic?
Right.
So the woke / liberal part of the Jewish demographic is considered to be on the losing side. And so on the one hand, I'm given a pat in the back for kind of doing my own thing and doing what's right. But as a whole, we don't look too good. And hopefully as more Jews wake up, we'll look better. The only thing I'll say about that is that out of all fairness, the Jewish communities that I'm part of have tried to maintain a very long-standing productive relationship with authorities, especially government authorities, and Um, a lot of the Jewish leaders got on board with government mandates about masks and shots and everything.
Hmm.
And I'm waiting for those leaders who kind of joined the bandwagon to kind of make public statements to the effect of, oops, we were betrayed, we were fooled,
Hmm.
um, to put the criticism where it deserves.
Hmm.
Um, Hopefully in time they will.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, I'm kind of like, that guy who from day one said you can't trust this. And I was given a whole lot of flack and ostracized, but that's part of the price you pay.
Hmm. Yeah.
If I can make one other point, I have a lot of sympathy for anybody, both Jewish people and Christian people all around, who are very reluctant to admit they were wrong.
Hmm.
And I talk to people about this. There are Jewish and Christian doctors who got
Hmm.
on board, and they pushed their spouses, they pushed their kids to get vaxxed, and now the data is overwhelming that this thing kills people and it disables people. So,
Right.
they are licking their wounds and they're saying, like, how could I possibly do this? So they're going through a horrible
Yeah.
moral quandary that they have to work through before
Hmm.
they can publicly say, oh my God, never again, as far as trusting the science, we've got to fix this. So
Right.
they need time. They need time to make amends, and they deserve the time.
Hmm. Have you been, because what, as I hear you speak, it brings a couple things to my mind. The movie Defiance, I don't know if you've seen it, Stephen, but it's one of my favorite movies about the Holocaust because I believe there was 2,500 people, Jews, who survived in the wilderness of Europe for I think 2 years, and it was a challenge for them. They had to meet multiple challenges, including the elements, the weather, but also once the Nazis found out where they were bombed. It was just horrible, but they were very resilient. They refused to surrender, to give up without a fight. And the other thing that I'm reminded of, just hearing you speak, in South Korea, I don't know if you are aware of this, you probably are, but part of the required teaching in K through 12 education is that the children have to learn the Torah, they have to learn the Talmud. And you would think to yourself, why would a secular country that's with a lot of Christians, why would they make that the Torah and the Talmud as required learning for K through 12 education? And the reason behind it, I found out years ago, was because they knew there was something unique about the Jewish people. And they were intelligent, highly successful, and they wanted to model whatever it was that Jews understood or learned, and they believed that learning would come through the Torah, through the study of the Talmud, and it would help their children to become more highly intelligent as well, following the model, which really just reminds me of the prophets foretold that this day would come where the nations, 10 men from the nations, would grab hold of the tzitzit of a Jew and say, we want to go with you because we know that Hashem, we know God is with you. So, have you received any negative feedback from your colleagues in this space of freedom fighters?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we're all paying a price here in terms of being ostracized by family members, by
Mhm,
friends, by members of the community.
mhm,
Um, and it's taken me a while to accept that. It's take and as I said earlier, I understand the huge sense of betrayal and the trauma of people going through these these oppressive strategies. And I understand that people need to lick their wounds, and that people
Mm-hmm.
have become mentally deranged and emotionally disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
So I shrug it off, and I accept the fact that I don't have the relationships that I once had, and I may never get them back, but that's has nothing to do with me. It
Mm-hmm.
has to do with their inability to wake up.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I mean there's no choice here. You do and say what you really feel you need to do. Capitulation is never an option, and to tell you the truth, capitulation to just go along with the herd is a sure route to death and misery. So I'd rather take my chances with doing the right thing and let
Mm-hmm.
the chips fall where they will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're an amazing man. I want to encourage people to go to your website to learn more. And if you wouldn't mind just telling our audience, Steve, how they can learn about you, what can they do to support the efforts of what you're doing? You are an inspiration, and I want our audience to hear this because, those of us who are on the front lines of this battle day in and day out, 24/6, it is overwhelming most of the time when, especially with what we're doing, we're trying to fight anti-Semitism, we're trying to fight the indoctrination in public education and even private education. It's not just the public schools, it's the private schools too. And we're trying to fight this battle, and it feels so overwhelming and like such a losing battle. But to see the individuals that you have compiled interviews with, to hear their story, to hear their about their inspiration, what propelled them to not surrender. And that's what I love about the people that you've interviewed and listening to their stories, because these people are committed to fight. This is what real, true American patriotism and people of faith, and I mean Jews and Christians, what you've captured is an inspiration to each of us, whether it comes from the political end or from the religious side. Stephen, you're doing an amazing job to inspire us because it does feel like it's a lonely job. But how can people connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, get involved in what you're doing?
Well, thank you. The website is freedomdefenseresourcecenter.com. Maybe you can post that when you post it, freedomdefenseresourcecenter.com, and there's a contact us. You'll see the three sections of the website. You'll see the data, you'll see the gallery of interviews, and you'll see the section in the Freedom blog about biblical lessons for today's war.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to thank you. I do a lot of interviews. I don't get interviewed, so I really appreciate you giving me the spotlight here. I like being able to tell my story as well and contribute it to our archive of inspirational stories. Thank you so much for doing that for me.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this program informative. We will post this podcast on our website and all of our podcast platforms so that you can share with your family and friends. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to stand against the ungodly rising threat that is destroying this nation and other Western nations, threatening our Judeo-Christian values and promoting anti-Semitism. We cannot remain silent. God warned the prophet Ezekiel about the responsibility of the watchman. As a watchman, you can sound the alarm and warn others by simply sharing this podcast with your family and friends. So please share and like this podcast to help sound the alarm in your community. We're reminded, Dietrich Bonhoeffer told us, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue our conversation about combating the rise of anti-Semitism and taking back local control of our communities and our children's education. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, You can help support this mission through our award-winning documentaries and Focus on Israel programs, as well as more programs just like this one for just $20 a month. So go to our website at pjtn.org to watch our programs and listen to our past podcasts. With your generous monthly donation, you can ensure that PJTN remains on the front lines and in the headlines. But we can't do it without your faithful prayers and financial support. I hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting our mission as we educate to activate Jews, Christians, and all people of conscience to stand on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the State of Israel, and these United States.
Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.